Welcome back to Professor Pincushion. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create this really cute passport cover. I made it look like a designer suitcase, and I'll show you exactly how you can get the same look. We could turn it and open it, and you'll see that it holds your passport with these pockets on the side. So now I'm going to tell you exactly what items you're going to need in order to make one yourself. In order to make the suitcase passport holder, you're going to need the following items. The first thing is we're going to need some fabric. So I have my main fabric and I have my lining. You don't need very much. You could probably get away with scraps. If you're buying it at the fabric store, maybe get 1/3 of a yard of each. Then I have some vinyl here, which I'm going to use to create my handles. You don't have to use vinyl. You can use any sort of heavy-duty fabric. I just like it because I don't have to worry about it fraying. And again, you can just get away with scraps on this. I just bought 1/8 of a yard. I have my lightweight interfacing, so I need about 1/3 of a yard of this. Our pattern pieces, which you can download off our website, professorpincushion.com. I have some all-purpose thread, a 1/4 inch width ribbon, and then I have my stamp and my ink pad. And this part is optional if you want to decorate your suitcase or not. It's completely up to you. So now I'm going to show you which patterns go with which fabric and what you need to cut out. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to need to cut out. So out of our main fabric, so this is going to be on the outside of our cover, you're going to need one of this piece, our suitcase passport cover piece. And then you're going to need 2 of this little small piece, which is the pockets. So you cut 2 out of this one out of this one, and you notice I have little notches here and here and one right here, so make sure you cut those out. I also have marks that need to be transferred. So I have these little dots for the handle placement, and then I have these lines here, and this is going to be for the placement of the ribbon on the outside. You're also going to use this same pattern piece to cut one out of your interfacing. You don't have to worry about this one, just this one. Out of our lining, we have this big long piece. So this one gets cut out of the lining. And then the last thing we need to do is cut 4 of our handle pieces out of our handle fabric. So if you're using vinyl, you're going to cut it out of the vinyl. So once you have all of that, then we can get started on putting it together. The first thing you need to do is apply our fusible interfacing to the wrong side of our main piece of fabric there. So this is the wrong side facing up. I'm going to take my interfacing and lay it down right on top of it. And I trimmed down my interfacing a little bit so it doesn't go directly to the edge. So the side with the bubble is going to go to the wrong side of the fabric. The side on top should be nice and smooth. I'm just going to center that, lay my pressing cloth, and I have my iron heating up so it's pretty hot. Dampen my cloth. And once it's pretty good, then I'm going to take my iron and lay it carefully over where I have my piece. I'm going to lay it there for about 5 to 6 seconds. And then carefully lift it up and move on to the next spot. So I'm not shifting it, I'm just lifting it up and moving it over. And then once it's done, I can lift this up and test it. Like on the corners here, I could probably do a little bit more heat, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. Once you have the interfacing on, go ahead and fold it in half lengthwise, so on the long side, and then I just press it on the bottom. So I create a nice crease here. So here's my fold, and here I have the open edges, and that's going to create the basis for my suitcase shape. The next step is the fun step. So now we get to decorate our suitcase however we want, and of course you can let your creativity fly, so there's no rules here. I am going to use my stamp, my homemade stamp here, and my ink pad. And you can do that. Another option is, I have one of the older ones I made. I just use felt to make little patches on it, so it looks like one of the older suitcases with the patches. The one thing you have to pay attention to is these lines here is going to be where the 1/4 inch ribbon is going to be placed, so try not to do your design on the line. Also, you need to pay attention to the seam allowance, because you obviously don't want your design to go too far into the edge where it's going to hit the seam allowance. So there's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So if you want, and it's going to go all the way around the perimeter, what I like to do is I'll just take my sewing gauge and then I'll just make a line at the 1/2 inch. So then I kind of have a perimeter to play with and make sure that I don't go into this part over here. Also, since it's folded in half, this is where the handles are going to be up here on the opposite side of the fold. So you make sure your design is going in the right direction. So you're not doing it sideways or doing it upside down. So if I'm doing, let's say, an arrow, the arrow is going to point up on this side. If I was to unfold it, if I would do another arrow, it would point down on this side, because if I were to flip it, I'd want to make sure that it's all going in the right direction. So like I said, I'm going to do a stamp. I'm just going to take my stamp here, press it in the pad so it gets nice and inked, and then let's just put it in the middle. Press down and then lift up. If you want to make sure that you get your design kind of neat and organized, you can do like I did here, where I just created 1-inch squares. So then I can keep my design at least looking more even than just trying to eyeball it, because I can't eyeball anything. Once you have your design, if you use the ink, go ahead to your iron and just press it again, because the heat will set the ink into your fabric. So it'll make it a little bit more permanent. So once you have your design, we can move on to the next step. After you finish designing your cover, what you're going to do is now take some of your ribbon and you're going to lay it on the dotted line from your pattern, the ribbon mark. Go ahead and take some straight pins and place them through the ribbon perpendicular all the way down. And I'm also going to do the same thing on this side. Once you have it pinned, you're then going to take it to your sewing machine and we're going to do a stitch right down the middle of the ribbon. So I'm just stitching down the middle using a regular stitch. Don't forget to back stitch and just go all the way down on both sides. Next, we're going to be working with the handle pieces. So you should have 4 of these pieces. I just have 2 of them here. And the reason why there's 4 is I'm going to take 2 of them and place them wrong side to wrong side, like that. So the handle, you're going to have the pretty side of the handle on both sides. If I was to flip it over here, you'd see it on this side. So if the back side of your handle piece doesn't look that bad, then you can go ahead and skip this. You can just have 2 handles, but I have 4 and I'm going to sew 2 of them together and then the other 2 together as well. So after I place them wrong side to wrong side, I'm going to stitch along the outside curve and the inside curve, and I'm getting as close as I can to the edge as possible. I'm just doing a regular stitch, and I don't have to worry about sewing the little ends here because that's going to be in the seam allowance, and I just want them lined up as best I can. And again, I'm going to do this for both pairs. Next, you're going to take each of your handle pieces and you're going to pin it to the right side of your pocket pieces. So I've already done that here. So I'm lining up the end of my handles with the edge of the fabric. And again, we have these marks here, so it kind of shows you where to place the handle. And you're just going to pin it on the ends. After you have it pinned, you're then going to take it to your machine and you're going to baste this edge. So we'll have these handles temporarily tacked to our pocket. When I baste my handles on, I'm just using the largest width stitch that I have on my machine, and I don't even need to back stitch. Just trying to tack them down so they'll stay put for when we attach this to our main fabric. That's it. Next, you're going to take each of your pocket pieces with the handles sewn on, and you're going to place it on the short end of your main piece. So this is the long end going this way, and here's the short end. I'm going to place them right side to right side, and I'm going to be matching the raw edges of the sides and also the notch. I have a notch here on my pocket And then I have a notch here, which is kind of see because it's kind of small and it's a little inverted one because I accidentally cut mine off. And once you have it lined up, you're just going to pin it, and then we're going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I already have it pinned on this side. So I'm just going to make sure I get to the 1/2 inch, and I'm doing a regular width stitch, and I'm going to be back stitching, and that's permanently going to not attach our pocket to our main piece, but also the handle is going to be in between those two pieces. So that was what creates that effect. And I'm going to do this to both sides. After both of the pockets are stitched onto your main fabric, go ahead and trim your seam allowance. So this was a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I just trimmed it down to 1/4 inch. Then press your pockets outward. Make sure that when you're using your iron, if you use vinyl here, that you're careful not to touch your iron to the vinyl because we don't want to have any problems with it melting or anything like that. So I just very carefully kind of iron on the sides of it and maybe a little bit down here. Next, you're going to take your lining fabric. So here's my lining, and I'm going to flip it so both pieces are right side to right side, and I'm going to line them up on top of each other. I'm going to pin all the way around because we're going to do a seam all the way around the whole thing. The only thing you need to remember is we need to keep an opening, and I like to keep an opening between my fold line that I have in my main fabric and the pocket. So maybe about 2 to 3 inches. So in order to mark that for myself, I just take my straight pins and I create an X with it. And then I'm going to do another one, let's say about right here. Just so you have enough to, stick your fingers in and turn the whole thing right side out after we stitch it. So then I can go ahead and just finish pinning around the circumference of the whole thing, the perimeter. So what I would do once I go to my machine, I'm going to start stitching here, and again, you're doing your 1/2 inch seam allowance, just a regular stitch. Don't forget to back stitch. Start here, stitch, pivot, pivot, stitch down here, pivot again, pivot, and then when I come here, I'm going to do a back stitch and I'm going to stop. So this is going to remain opening from here to here. So I'm going to go ahead, finish pinning it and stitching it, and then we'll take it from there. After you're finished stitching all the way around, you're going to go ahead and cut your corners like I've done here. I'm just going to do this last one. This is so when we flip it right side out, it's not going to get bulky in the corners. All right. And I'm going to go to my opening and flip it right side out. After I finish flipping it out, you can go ahead, take it to your machine, and just press all the edges so it's really nice and clean looking. I turned my passport cover right side out, and I went ahead and pressed around the edges. And where I had my opening, I just took my fabric and I folded it under or in between the opening there. So it's all even on this side, and just stick a couple of pins in there to hold it. And the next step, the last step that we really have to do, is you're going to take your pockets now and you're going to fold it to the inside of the passport cover, so into the lining like this, and you turn it so that your seam between the pocket and the right side is going to be right on that fold there, and you have your handle sticking out. So once I have that done, I'm going to stick a couple of pins in to hold it. I'm going to stick one in on this side, and this is what's going to create our pocket so we can slip our passport cover into the sides there. So I'm going to pretend this one's pinned. I'm just going to flip it over. And then what you're going to do is you're going to top stitch as close as you can to the edge, right along this side, and then right along the top here. And that's going to keep the pockets permanently stitched to the inside so we won't have to worry about them. And then your passport cover should be done. So doing this top stitch, I'm just doing a regular width stitch, making sure to back stitch on both sides. And again, I'm trying to get as close as I can to the edge, because if you go too far in, your passport book might not fit into your pockets, because it's pretty fitted with my pattern pieces. After I finish this, I can go ahead and erase any fabric markers I have and take out any basting stitches that still remain. And after that, you're done. And here we have our completed designer suitcase passport cover. So let's open it up and take a look inside. All right, I have my passport already in it. You see we have these pockets that hold in the sides. And if you want, you could put a sew and snap on each side so you can keep it closed. But other than that, it's ready to go on vacation.